Connecticut East This Week is supported by
the Connecticut Council on Problem Gambling is a nonprofit organization which, through advocacy, prevention, and education, is here to support individuals and families who are impacted by problem gambling. Our helpline, 1-888-789-7777, is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also have live chat and text support through our website, www.ccpg.org.
As diversity, equity, and inclusion are struck off from federal websites by the new administration, it's down to state organizations to be there for everyone in the community, regardless of age, gender, or race. Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. Communities we live in can be inclusive or exclusive, and it's something that has been happening for years. And with the new administration in Washington, we're seeing challenges against diversity, equity, and inclusion in our society. And whether it's about religion, race, gender identity, or even age, discrimination is everywhere. Recently, I caught up with Stonington Pride, an organization based in the town of Stonington that came about a few years ago because of some local objections around certain flags in schools and literature for younger people. Here's my interview with Farah Garland, one of the co-founders and organizers of Stonington Pride. Farah, thanks for joining us on the podcast. Just explain to us about Stonington Pride, how it got started.
Stonington Pride was born in 2023, so we're fairly young. It was not intended to actually be a whole organization. We were just responding to the Stonington School District decided not to formally observe Pride Month along with the rest of the Heritage Months. For the upper grades, that meant that the GSAs could do what they wanted to do, but no full support from the schools. And for the lower grades, the younger kids, for the Heritage Months, what they usually do is they'll read an age-appropriate book for Black History Month and so on. For Pride Month, they just decided that there was no appropriate books for kids, which of course is very silly. We decided that was really sad and that kids deserve to have books read to them about kindness and love and inclusion. So we decided we would read kids' books, and we decided to have a reading in the park. And we started putting that together, called it a Read with Pride, and invited people to just come out, bring their favorite kids' books, bring their families, just have a really lovely, positive, uplifting, family-friendly day of kids and queer books, and it was lovely. And as we spoke to the district and the Board of Ed and so on, we got some pushback, we got some less than positive responses, and it turned from just a reading in the park to a protest. Still very kind, very positive, very uplifting, but shifted a little bit. People came from all over the state and definitely all over Stonington. We met in the rain with rainbow-striped umbrellas. People held signs, and folks came from the local bookstores and whatnot and did dramatic readings for kids from these wonderful, inclusive children's books. And it was a beautiful day, and the kids painted their faces with biodegradable glitters and face paints. And it was just a beautiful day of community being together. And from our perspective, that was where it was going to end. Except we were approached by so many members of our community of all ages, but also older members that kept saying things like, my goodness, I've lived here for 5 years, 20 years, 30 years. I thought I was the only gay person in Stonington. I've been thinking about moving away because I have no community here. I thought I was alone. It's so wonderful to see community here. And we knew that it couldn't just end with books in the park.
How surprised were you when you started to hear some of those comments, as you say, from older members of the Stonington community as well?
I have to say, I was quite surprised. On one hand, I don't fe I ha didn't feel like there was a large queer presence in Stonington, but the LGBTQ folks that I know are closer to my age, 30s and under. But on the other hand, I suppose I had assumed that our elder queers, especially the ones that had been here for a while, had found each other somehow. So I was surprised to hear that, in one way at least, to hear that there was not that community. And in another way, not surprised at all, because I don't think anyone really was feeling that connection. Everybody felt alone.
There'd also been a situation as well, I believe, in some Stonington schools with regards to the LGBTQ flag and flags in general. Talk to us about that. And was that also another aspect of why you felt that the Pride organisation needed to be created and be there for the community?
Absolutely. So the year prior, in 2022, there had been a whole snafu, I guess is the best way I can think of to put it, around the pride flags in the schools. A parent or few had approached the district about not feeling that they were appropriate in the schools, and they had temporarily removed them while they discussed things with the town's attorneys. This was not communicated well to the public, who just heard the schools have removed the pride flags. Many people went and yelled at Board of Ed meetings, myself included, though not yelling, just vehemently and passionately sharing our perspectives. And in the end, everybody in the decision-making positions decided the pride flags belonged in the schools and they're back and it's okay. But a lot of people felt very kind of unsure during those weeks and that we didn't know how things were going to resolve. And since then, as I talk to people and say, oh, yes, I'm Stonington Pride, I still hear people say, Stonington, ah, yes, the town that took the flags out of the classrooms. So, yeah, it's definitely sad to know that Stonington is not special in this, but to know that there are people who, for whatever reason, do not want that representation of safety and inclusion for our queer kids and teachers. And we felt that it was really important to have someone making community and standing up for our queer community and queer communities in schools now more than ever.
Let's talk about obviously where we stand at this moment in time in American history with a new administration who have been quite clear that there are two genders, it's male, it's female, and they've also said just recently that transgender, certainly athletes, they're going to bar them from taking part in certain sports. Where does that place all of this? Has this set the situation back, do you feel? And if so, where's the fight have to go?
Oh, goodness, that's a big question. Where does it put it all? It sets civil rights back. It sets queer rights back for sure. As far as our work, it doesn't set our work back at all. In fact, we've been preparing for this since we heard Trump announce his intention to run, because we've been through a Trump presidency before. And as you mentioned, he's been nothing but clear about his intentions and how he feels about our community. So this has not taken us by surprise. All it means is that the fight is on, the work is must be done harder, and we're certainly not giving up or giving in. They can have whatever feelings they want to have about sex and gender, but science is still a thing and is not affected by one's feelings. And regardless of what executive orders or laws are passed, queer and trans people have always existed and always will exist. And Stonington Pride, along with the other organizations that we work alongside, are certainly not going to stop fighting to make sure that we are cared for and protected, whether that is we've helped to organize and advertise gender marker and ID clinics. We do community building events just to help community get to know each other and protect each other. We're trying to work with some folks to help take care of the immigrants in our community and make sure that's a community that's cared for because this is intersectional work. We aren't going anywhere, and we've just got to keep taking care of each other.
Talking about resources, there's always been resources out there, but some of those resources have been disappearing, certainly off of federal like websites, etc., which has, of course, raised alarm bells within the LGBTQ plus community that by doing so, that could cause harm. It removes people's ability to find services in their area. How do you combat that? Because it is important. If people no longer feel supported, they may not feel able to come out or approach other people when they need help.
Absolutely. And it is a very big issue. One of the things that we do and that we encourage everyone to do is to continue to pester our legislators and let them know what is important, what we do want to see in our government, and how we want them representing us. That's their job. At the same time, another thing that we have been doing at Stonington Pride, and again, collaborating with other groups in Connecticut and beyond, is working on our own resource lists. We do have one that is publicly available that's a list of queer-friendly and supportive businesses, healthcare providers, therapists. You need your haircut, you need gender-affirming care, you need a safe place to go because of domestic violence. Anything in between, we're continually working to build out that list because while we're continuing to try to pressure our government from our state reps on up to take care of us and provide for us, we also can't bank on that. So we are trying to make sure that we're helping to serve our communities as best we can.
Let's talk about the people that you serve. What are they saying to you as well? Because I'm sure conversations have been had, are continuing to be had, and probably have even stepped up a bit, obviously, since the new administration came in and started mentioning the things that they intend and are, in fact, trying to do. So give us a sense of how people are feeling and what they're talking to you about.
The anxiety across the board is significant. We've been hearing a lot of just fear and anxiety about being able to present as themselves in public. Even though expressing gratitude that we live in a fairly safe state as far as that goes, and I do use some air quotes there, but we do. We live in a pretty safe state for being a queer person. But even there's some anxiety around that and around what gender markers you have on, whether it's your passport or something as silly, quote unquote, as your car insurance, and just making sure that all of that is in order and is not something that can be weaponized against you somehow. I've been hearing a lot of anxiety from folks about healthcare access currently and in the future. And that's obviously access to gender affirming care. But there's also a very large intersection with queer folk and disabled folk. So the attack on Medicare and Medicaid is a very big concern. There's a lot of fear there. And then a lot of just like concern and compassion around the immigrant communities, the increase of ICE in our communities is something that just folks are very worried about. Because, like I said, this is a very intersectional issue. We have some folks looking at leaving the country, which is really sad because diversity does make us better, stronger. And it is really heartbreaking to know that we have folks that feel unsafe to the point that they do not feel that they can remain here. So at the same time, we have people who are gearing up to fight and to really dig in on doing the work, doing the social justice work, helping their communities, helping with housing, volunteering with all of their local community places, whether it's IASC, the ACLU, Human Rights Campaign. Just it's people are really giving in and giving back in incredible ways.
Over the last maybe 5, 10, 15 years, the ability to come out and be your authentic self has become easier. It's not easy, but it has become easier for certain generations than it was for obviously older generations. But are you finding from the young people who are like exploring their sexuality and their gender identity, do you feel that they may now keep a more introspective look rather than feel the freedom of being able to come out because of this slight polarizing time that we're living through?
Yeah, it is a really difficult question to answer, partly because it's looking into the future and partly because it's speculating about how others feel. But from observation and listening to the people around me, I would say, yeah, I think so. We have some really wonderful and brave youngsters that just inspire me and that just defy the odds. At the same time, the rise in homophobia and transphobia, hate speech, and attacks on queer and trans people just since the election has been like statistically notable. If I were a young queer person, I would feel a lot less confident about just coming out than I would have 4 or 5 or 10 years ago, perhaps. And that's saying something because 4 or 5 or 10 years ago, it was not the easiest time either.
Do you feel that sort of celebrities who are supporters or advocates for the community still have some sway? Fairly recently, Lady Gaga made a comment at the Grammy Awards recognizing and saying that trans people are not invisible. Do you think that still carries some weight again in this time that we're living through and is helpful maybe to certain parts of the community? Or do you think that's starting to be a little bit diluted because of concerns?
I think it's always helpful to have anyone with a position of notoriety, a position where they've got eyes and ears on them to speak up and speak out for marginalized groups. Similarly, Chapel Roan also spoke out at I think it was also the Grammys, about how she has made it to where she is thanks to trans girls. If we don't have people with positions of power and privilege speaking out on behalf of us, we are in a much worse place. That said, it is certainly not enough to just have celebrities saying that we're here and we're valid and we're fantastic, but it is still good for sure.
I want to ask you about resources you were talking about a little bit earlier in the conversation that you're hoping to put together or you are putting together. Can you give us a sense of what some of those are and how people can access them?
So we have been working to put together a list of queer resources, or queer friendly resources, I should say. And they are just everything from, we have it currently broken down by state. We are amassing resources from predominantly Connecticut, but also Rhode Island, and working on doing Massachusetts and some surrounding states as well. And we focused a lot on healthcare, just local healthcare providers that are affirming, that are safe, so on and so forth. But we also have services available online, statewide, nationally for elders, like advocacy services, resources, queer, like case review options for people in nursing homes that are experiencing hardship or abuse. We've got a whole list of hotlines that we think are very actually good and useful. Housing and shelter, legal and policy support, mental health, substance abuse, and then also things like you need your nails, your hair, waxing done, other pride centers, rehab, supports, shelter, more shelters and housing, community centers, tattoos, piercing, things for the youth, all sorts of stuff. And then just also links to business directories that have been doing similar things. And as far as how to find that, we have made a very convenient bit.ly. And so that address, if I may, is just bit.ly/LGBTQ resources, and the R in resources is capitalized.
That's great. I suppose the final question to put to you is, as you are based in Stonington. How do you feel the leadership there, be it Democrat or Republican, are with regards to what it is you're trying to achieve as an organization? Do you feel that there is a listening ear there?
Washington, our first selectman for select person, which is like our mayor, is a really wonderful woman named Danielle Cheeseborough. She's an independent forward party or whatever it is. Anyway, and she has been incredibly wonderful, incredibly supportive. We met with her last year about wanting to raise a flag on town property, and she said, let's do an entire like town proclamation that June is Pride Month. We're doing one again this year. She's helping us put together all sorts of like wonderful things to make June a wonderful, supportive, safe Pride Month. And then Heather Summers is our senator. She is a Republican, but she is, for a Republican, weirdly supportive and wonderful on queer issues because I think she's very big on mental health and the importance of that. And I think that she just really sees that supporting queer folks, trans kids, etc., is like a life-saving thing. And so she has been very supportive. She came to our Pride dedication, and so we feel very lucky. Some of the folks in town, a little bit different sometimes, but also a lot of support from community members. We're honestly pretty lucky, even in this climate, to have some pretty good support. And we are here in Stonington, but we do work beyond the greater Stonington area, but then also throughout Connecticut, nationally, however we can help. We do online, Zoom-based stuff, as well as local in-person community things. So however we can help and serve, we're there. And yeah, we're just really fortunate to have the community and the leadership that we do.
Farah Garlands of Stonington Pride, thank you for talking to us. Thank you for explaining your organization, the resources and the work that you and other members are doing. And we look forward to Pride this year, 2025.
Thank you so much, Brian. This has been such a pleasure.
And if you're in need of LGBTQ plus services or resources in and around the Stonington or wider area, here is that web link again you heard in the report. It's bit.ly/LGBTQ resources with a capital R on the resources. And there you'll find a fairly comprehensive list of services, organizations, and resources for Connecticut and Rhode Island.
As veterans, we're no strangers to helping others.
That's what we were taught, service before self.
But we do have one question for the veterans listening.
When was the last time you reached out for help?
If you or someone you know needs resources, whether it's for stress, finances, employment, or mental health, don't wait. Reach out.
Find more information at va.gov/reach. That's va.gov/reach.
Brought to you by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs and the Ad Council.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week. In the day this week, Governor Lamont and state lawmakers have agreed to salvage a $40 million plan to infuse cash-strapped districts with additional special education funds after the governor initially rejected the legislator's appropriation in a line-item veto. House and Senate are expected to vote again on the spending portions of two multi-pronged emergency certification bills that Lamont had refused to sign into law, narrowly avoiding what would have been the first veto override in his tenure. In his veto statement, Lamont said he could not agree to the expenditures, which included a $40 million boost to the state's special education excess cost grant and more than $2.8 million for nonprofits, because the appropriations would push the state budget well over the spending cap. In a later statement, Lamont said he was glad an agreement between his office and the legislative leaders on increasing funding for special education and nonprofits during this current fiscal year was possible, provided we maintain our surplus, he said. Senator Kathy Austin, the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee, said the state currently has $390 million in unallocated funds, while Austin said she originally hoped to add $80 million to the special education excess cost grant. She said the $40 million is something we should take. Community groups are coming together to expand voting rights to all Connecticut residents. Edwin J. Vieira of the Connecticut News Service reports on the new campaign.
The Connecticut Right to Vote campaign says it aims to ensure all lawful permanent residents would be able to vote, as well as encourage them to turn out for local, state, and federal elections. The campaign's centerpiece is HJ 26, a bill that would allow lawful permanent residents to vote. Helen Quiñones with Make the Road Connecticut says the campaign and bill have widespread support.
We don't have only the support for the community who are not able to vote now. We have the support for the community who actually can vote, but we need to increase the vote participation in Connecticut because a lot of people don't go to vote in local and municipal elections.
Despite support for the campaign and this bill, Quiñones acknowledges it may take 5 years to accomplish their goals, given the current political climate. As President Donald Trump continues to support mass deportations, groups working for immigrants' rights want Connecticut lawmakers to bolster state immigration laws to better protect residents. A crux of the campaign will center on using voting rights in local and municipal elections. State data show declines in voter turnout across local and federal elections. Ariana Fernandez with United Parents and Students says educating parents about voting will be a big part of their efforts, helping them understand the importance in their own lives of being able to vote.
The biggest way to have a voice in their child's education is through a vote and deciding who represents whatever education matters that affect their children. So as an example of like the Board of Education. And we know during these local elections, there's a lot of parents who are left out of that voting process.
She points out if people who live and work in the state can't vote, it's a form of taxation without representation. It's estimated immigrants in Connecticut contribute more than $406 million a year in taxes to the state's economy. This is Edwin J. Vieira for Connecticut News Service.
Democratic State Representative for the 41st District, Andre Baumgardner, was arrested recently by the Town of Groton Police Department for driving a vehicle while under the influence. Baumgardner was stopped in the early hours on the Gold Star Highway by police for also driving a vehicle with a flat tire. In a police report, Baumgardner repeatedly told officers initially he had not been drinking, despite officers detecting the smell of alcohol on his breath. Baumgardner also wouldn't say where he had been before the pullover, and his wife was also found asleep in the back of the car. Baumgardner was arrested and charged with reckless driving and DUI and released on a $1,500 non-surety bond. He will appear in court in New London on March 14th. In the meantime, he has been suspended from all committee and leadership assignments until further notice. Baumgardner did release a statement through his office accepting full responsibility for his actions and apologized to his constituents and said he will be taking steps to make sure it never happens again. And the social media pages of certain branches of the military have been censored and changed to accommodate President Trump's executive order about restoring America's fighting force. The changes are being called a digital refresh and have been ordered by the Department of Defense. In eastern Connecticut, the social media pages of U.S. Navy submarine base New London have been stripped of all previous photos and postings, effectively creating new pages. Connecticut East This week reached out to the Public Relations Department and also the Deputy Secretary of Defense for clarification about the changes, but have received no response to our inquiries. A memorandum issued on the matter states that content from the last 4 years are the immediate priority to align DoD communications with the current administration. Items removed from military social pages relate to anything that promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.